What do you say to the skeptics, though, in the party, or want to keep him at arm's distance? Some who have some problems with him, even some fellow New Yorkers in the swing districts outside the city.
Get to know him. Get to know him. You know, this is not about having any kind of hard line. I think that if anybody is skeptical, I would say get to know him. And once you get into a room with him, kick the tires yourself and make your own assessment instead of just kind of making assessments from what you may see on television. If you have the ability to meet someone in person, you should meet them before you judge.
Bernie, AOC, Mandani are not Democrats. They'll be the first to tell you that. They're Democratic Socialists, and that's a very different thing.
Bill Maher just did the one thing the Democratic Party hates more than losing elections. He said the quiet part out loud about AOC, Bernie, and socialism.
This election is taking place when we have an administration in Washington which every day is moving us toward an authoritarian society.
This is America, New York City. Don't let them tell you any different. Don't let them tell you that we are the exception. We are the rule. And we set the bar for America. I'm talking to you, Donald Trump.
Let our words ring out so loud tonight that Andrew Cuomo can hear them in his $8,000 a month apartment. New York is not for sale.
Bernie Sanders, his big thing was always bringing single-payer health care to our country of 340 million. But when liberal, tie-dyed Vermont tried to do it for a population of 626,000, it collapsed like that poor the Oval Office last week.
Not in a polite panel discussion, not in a think tank white paper, but in a monologue that felt less like comedy and more like a political intervention. And if you only watched the usual Maher destroys socialism videos floating around, you probably saw a lot of recycled jokes and surface-level cheering. Today, we're going deeper than that. And yeah, we're also going to roast those copy-paste breakdowns that keep repeating the same Vermont line like it's the only example in history.
At least the party has a clear choice here, very clear. One wing is saying don't ever use the word socialist again, and one is saying,
I am a democratic socialist.
Clear, huh? So how do we decide who's right? Well, it turns out we don't really have to flip a coin. We have the evidence. In 2024, 13 Democrats won. In districts, Trump also won. All moderates. This isn't rocket science. All the left-leaning think tanks have done autopsies on 2024, and they all came up with the same message: move to the center. Even the New York Times, which did so much to promote woke politics, now says the partisans are wrong. Moving to the center is the way to win. And Democrats should recognize the party moved too far left on social issues after Obama left office.
Maher warns that choosing ideology over electability is the surest way to lose election.
Here's the real story. Maher's been a Democrat longer than most of Twitter has been alive, but now he sounds like the designated driver watching his friends order another round of bad ideas at 2 a.m. He's looking at AOC, Bernie Sanders, and Zoran Mamdani, and basically saying, guys, I've seen this movie. It does not end with a happy montage. Your competitor's video tried to frame that as just another Maher owns the left moment, but they mostly just rephrased his jokes and dumped them in a row. High retention content needs more than that. It needs stakes. It needs conflict. It needs to ask, if Maher is right, what happens next to the entire party? Start with who he's actually talking about. AOC and Bernie aren't pretending to be centrist Democrats. They literally call themselves Democratic Socialists. Mamdani, same thing. Proud DSA, unapologetic left, no hiding it. Maher's point is brutally simple. That label is not just branding, it's direction. It tells you where the car is aimed. And the party, instead of tapping the brakes, is flirting with it like it's some edgy new fashion trend. Your competitor's script mentioned this, sure, but in a way that felt like a long blog post read out loud. No escalation, no new angle, just they're Democratic Socialists on repeat. Let's actually put that idea under pressure, because Mamdani isn't just some loud guy on social media. He's power. He's proof the far left can win real offices, not just retweet wars. New York City just elected him mayor on a platform that doesn't flirt with socialism. It dates it, buys it dinner, and gives it a spare toothbrush. Free this, tax that, rewrite the economic game from the ground up. Maher looks at that and doesn't see an experiment. He sees the early chapters of every How It Fell Apart documentary he's ever joked about. And whether you agree with him or not, that's why this rant landed differently. This isn't theoretical anymore. It's not just campus protests and clever slogans. It's the guy with the pen and the budget. So Maher does what Maher always does when he wants to make a point impossible to ignore. He pulls out the receipts from the rest of the world. He doesn't start with theory, he starts with a picture. Capitalist South Korea versus socialist North Korea at night from space. One side lit up like Times Square. The other side so dark it looks like a power outage no one bothered to fix. He doesn't have to say a word, the visual does half the work. Then he jumps to Venezuela and Poland. In 1990, Venezuela had more money than Poland. Then Poland went all in on markets and private enterprise, while Venezuela went all in on socialism for the 21st century. Fast forward, and Poland is a functioning, growing economy, while Venezuela is shortages, runaway prices, and millions of people fleeing anything that looks like a border. Now, your competitor did mention this, but here's where they blew a huge opportunity. They used it as a wow, crazy socialism bad moment and just moved on. What they didn't do is ask what Maher is really warning about. Not the word socialism, but the mindset that says, sure, it failed everywhere else, but we'll do it better this time because vibes. That's what he's calling out. The belief that New York or the U.S. is some magical exception to gravity. That if you slap for the people on a policy, it somehow obeys different math. And then comes his favorite weapon, Vermont. Bernie Sanders' whole brand is universal healthcare, single-payer, one big national system for everyone. The competitor video repeated that Vermont story so many times, you'd think it was stuck on loop. Here's what actually matters. Vermont tried a version of that idea, a tiny, super liberal state, basically a Bernie sandbox. They ran the numbers, pushed the plan, and by the time they saw the tax bill, they backed away like it was a live grenade. It wasn't because they didn't believe in healthcare, it was because reality did the one thing ideology hates. It showed up with a calculator. Maher grabs that example for a reason. Not to say, never try to fix healthcare, but to say, if it can't work there, with that population, how are you going to scale it to 340 million people? That's not a dunk. That's a question that demands a real answer. But the socialist wing doesn't like questions that don't fit on a poster. And this is where the hypocrisy starts to sting. Maher points out that the same people calling capitalism a rigged disaster are thriving inside it. AOC's brand deals, Bernie's book sales, social media reach, donors, platforms, all of it exists because free markets, tech companies, and attention economies built the stage. In a hardcore socialist system, you don't become a superstar who spends all day trashing the system. The system eventually turns off your mic. That's not a gotcha line. It's a reminder that some of the loudest voices are campaigning against the very thing that gave them a megaphone. Your competitor brushed that point, but they let it float past. High retention scripting means you stop there and twist the knife a bit. Call it what it is. Clout powered by capitalism, pretending it would be just as shiny in a system that historically crushes dissent and flattens individuality. You don't have to agree with Maher to see the tension. You just have to be honest enough to admit it exists. Now, Maher's not pretending capitalism is perfect. He's not out here saying everything is fine, go home, no problems. He openly says capitalism is messy, uneven, unfair in places. Housing, medical bills, wages. None of that disappears because you tell a good joke about socialism's failures. But his argument is about track record. Capitalism is chaotic, but it's adaptive. Socialism, in its real-world versions, isn't just flawed, it crashes. Not in a soft, gentle way either. It crashes in the mass shortages, huge inflation, people leaving the country in waves kind of way. That's why he uses Venezuela, not some random mid-tier case. He's picking the example that looks most like a warning flare. And this is where the electoral stakes come in. Maher doesn't just want to win arguments online, He wants Democrats to win elections in real life. That's why he brings up people like Abigail Spanberger. She's not trending on TikTok. She's not throwing revolutionary slogans on X. She's a centrist who said, clearly, years ago, if we don't move back to the middle, we are going to get torn apart. Recently, she wins big in Virginia. Not by promising to blow up capitalism, but by promising to make it work better for real people. Meanwhile, the party's national vibe still feels like it's being set by its loudest socialists. Your competitor quoted the stats. Moderates winning in Trump districts, think tanks urging a move to the center. Even the liberal media finally hinting that maybe we went too far. But they treated it like a chart, not a story. The story is this: data is screaming one answer, vibes are whispering another, and party leadership keeps acting like vibes pay the bills. Critics of Maher push back and say he's oversimplifying. They argue that democratic socialism isn't the same as the regimes he keeps pointing to, that young people are drifting left because they're fed up with unaffordable rent, student debt, and health costs, not because they secretly want to recreate Venezuela. And that criticism isn't crazy. There really are countries with heavy welfare states and strong safety nets that didn't melt down. Maher's answer would probably be, fine. But that's not what's on the ballot when people start chanting slogans and selling fantasies with no price tag. That's the real conflict. It's not capitalism versus socialism in a textbook. It's stable but flawed system with repairs versus glorious new system that no one can actually make work at scale, but sounds amazing in a speech. One path gets you boring budgets and gradual improvement. The other gets you trending hashtags and a very real risk of political and economic disaster if you actually try it at full strength. Underneath the jokes, that's what Maher is terrified by. Not passion, but recklessness. The Democratic Party right now is split between two instincts. One side says, stop saying socialist, stop promising revolutions, win elections in the messy middle. The other side says, we are democratic socialists. Say it louder. Go further. If you're not all in, you're the problem. That's not a small disagreement. That's a fork in the road. And Maher is standing at the fork, waving a giant neon sign that says, you are not as special as you think. Other countries thought they were exceptions too. And here's where your competitor's video really fumbled the bag. In the end, Maher isn't auditioning for most likable liberal. He draws a line. That's the line your competitor's script danced around but never fully stepped on. And that's the line you have to answer for yourself. If you're still here, you're exactly the kind of viewer this conversation needs. Drop a comment right now. Would you rather live under fixed but flawed capitalism or take your chances on beautiful but risky socialism? Don't just name a team. Tell me why.